All right, I'll wait about a minute to get started. Just to make sure. All right, I'm going to get going. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our last town hall meeting, our third and last, at least at this point. And I, Humberto Gurmilan, the president of the governing board, call this special board meeting of the San Ysidro School District to order at 5:04. I would like to ask that all members of the board mute their devices at this time. Also, other people in attendance right now, please. Trustees of San Ysidro School District Board and the public shall participate in this meeting via teleconference. The public may view the open session part of this meeting by accessing the YouTube link provided on the agenda. To listen to this meeting in Spanish, please call 1-321-866-6374 and enter the access code 675-859-460 and pound. Si usted desea escuchar o ver esta reunión, en español, por favor marque al número 1, área 321-866-6374 y el código de acceso es 675-859-460 y el signo de gato. Members of the public are welcome to record this meeting using their own personal devices. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that this governing board meeting is conducted pursuant to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-29-20. At this moment, we'll conduct roll call, which is item number 2 in tonight's agenda, and I will ask our superintendent, Dr. Gina Potter, to please help us with roll call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Calling roll call, agenda item number 2. Mrs. Rosalia Palasigue, our board member, is watching the virtual town hall this evening via YouTube. So moving on to Mrs. Irene Lopez. We do know that she was planning to attend. So for right now, she's not here. We can notify everybody when she does come the time for the purpose of the minutes that she does join us. We do also have with us this evening Board Clerk Rudy Lopez. Mr. Lopez, do you mind saying here?
I think he said he was having internet problems.
Okay, I see him joining us. And then Mr. Board Vice President, Antonio Martinez.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. And Board President Humberto Gurmilan.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Gurmilan. So, Mr. President, at this time, we have 3 board members here, and we do have a quorum for the town hall meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Potter. I will now ask each board member to please respond to the following questions. Mr. Lopez, can you hear me well? You can do thumbs up if you want with the reactions. Oh, here it is. And were you able to hear our proceedings up to this point?
I was.
And do you have an agenda for tonight? Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Martinez, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Were you able to hear our proceedings up to this point?
Yes.
Awesome. And were you? Do you have a copy of tonight's agenda?
Yes.
Thank you. I will now move on to item number 3, which is flag salute. And I will ask everybody to mute your devices at this moment, and I'll lead us into flag salute. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. We're now moving on to item number 4, which is approval of tonight's agenda. I will now ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Martinez moves, and I'll second the motion. No changes, I believe. So, Dr. Potter, would you please mind calling a roll call vote for us?
Calling for the roll call vote for agenda item number 4, beginning with Board Clerk Rudy Lopez.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Vice President Antonio Martinez.
Yes.
Thank you. Board President Humberto Gurmilan.
Yes.
Mr. President, the vote passes 3-0.
Thank you, Dr. Potter. That moves us on to item number 5, which is general administration. And it's 5.1 virtual town hall meeting, what we're here for tonight, to seek community and stakeholder input regarding the development of the long-range master facility plan, Ocean View Hills, Vista del Mar Middle, and San Ysidro Middle School. WLC Architects Incorporated President, Mr. Jim DiCamillo, will facilitate this virtual town hall meeting to seek community and stakeholder input regarding the development of the district's long-range master facility plan for Ocean View Hills, Vista del Mar, and San Ysidro Middle School. Public comments and questions should be submitted via email by 6 p.m. on or before Thursday tonight. And you should do that at public comment at SYSDschools.org. Again, public comment at SYSDschools.org. So if you hear anything that would like to contribute, that's the way of doing it. Public comments and questions will be read and answered following the presentation. So now, before we go into our virtual town, well, actually, should we do the comments first, public comment, or first the presentation?
According to the agenda, Mr. President, it does say that we would have public comments following the presentation.
Okay, perfect. So, Mr. DiCamillo, would you like to take it away, please?
Sure, and I think someone's able to share the PowerPoint with everybody now, correct? Let's see if that comes up. Todd is.
There we go.
Oh. If you want to start the slideshow there, Todd, and that way that'll expand to a full screen. Okay, for everybody in attendance, many of the board have heard this presentation before, but not specifically in regards to the 3 schools that we're going to look at this evening. So some of it will be redundant for those who have sat in the previous town halls, but the tail end of it will focus just strictly on those 3 campuses. So real quickly, this presentation is part edification for those watching or listening, partly to describe what a facility master plan is, because most people don't know, and there's no reason you should. And then also then to give input on the schools that we're talking about this evening. So I'll spend a little bit of time in the beginning talking about what a master plan is, and then focusing on the schools, and then opening it up for comment. So to get started with, a facility master plan is truly a district-wide facility master plan. And as this slide shows, it's a very big school district from running east to west along the Southern California border. And I think you're all pretty familiar with it if you live in the community. Important to note, next slide, that all of the schools are somewhat compact, all in the very western edge of that large school district acreage. And the reason I bring this up, and I've brought it up every time that we've met, is that in some of the places that I work, and I work all over California, we have very large districts, and people don't typically go from one school to the other. They could live their whole K-12 life without ever seeing most of the other schools. But that's not the case in San Ysidro. Your schools are very close together. In this particular case, we're going to be talking about 3 campuses, 2 in the northeast quadrant, Ocean View Hills and Vista del Mar, and then 1 in the southeast quadrant, San Ysidro Middle School. And you see those all on the map. Green indicates the schools that go up into the 8th grade, and blue are the elementaries. For those who did not attend, and I think board president described, we've already had similar input sessions on all the rest of the schools on that map. So these are the last 3 that we'll be talking about this evening. Next slide. Now, this is part of the process, which is a lot of information and input gathering. People should think of me somewhat as their counselor, here to listen to input. I'm very talented, but I'm not so talented as to be able to walk around the school district and tell you what ails you. I have some guesses and some hints from experience, but a lot of it is known by the people who use the schools every day. The buildings don't talk, so oftentimes the facilities master planning process is, the real core of it is seeking input from stakeholders. And there are a number of different stakeholders groups that we seek input from because they all sort of see out their own eyes and listen with their own ears for different topics. And you, this audience here this evening, is really the community group right in the dead center of that list. Why do we talk to different groups? The reason is because the San Ysidro School District, the facilities people, the maintenance people, they have different issues when it comes to your facilities. They have to maintain parking lots and roofs, and they are very concerned about those things. Why do we talk to the individual school sites? Because they live in the school every day and they know what door should have been over there versus where it is now, that, as I always say, keeps them from bumping into the building every day to do what they do for a living. Why do we talk to the community? Because the community is really the client. They're the people who go to the schools on a regular basis. Some don't even have kids in the school, but they're annoyed by the drop-off traffic in the morning or the pickup traffic in the afternoon. And so they watch and see the schools with a little bit different viewpoint. We do oftentimes talk to students as well. You might think they're too young to know, but they actually are the consumers of the product. And so it's nice to get input where we can from students. And then lastly, government agencies. What do I mean by that? That's the city, the parks department, those areas that might actually align with the school district and occasionally do joint use sorts of things, and even the city from street maintenance and the like. Not everything in control of the school district is in their control. The schools are adjoining city streets, which are the purview of the city, and oftentimes it's misunderstood that the city and the school district are the same entity. They are not. The school district controls the on-site properties of their schools, but not the off-site. So that's who we talk to, and we have been talking with people for the last few months. We are just about to set up meetings. In fact, they're being scheduled right now with the teacher groups, the faculty at each school, and those meetings are currently being set up. The first one is coming up in just another week or so, and we will do the same and go through each school and hear input from the faculty. Next slide. So oftentimes what comes up, or people ask me, Jim, what's the core of a master plan? And I always look at it really in the universe of, think of it as a doctor. You go to the doctor and you're going to tell you different things that might ail you. And then the doctor is going to prescribe, he or she will prescribe different ways to solve what ails you, a remedy, a cure. So the key challenges or problems that we see in most school districts today, that facility-wise, are the six listed here on this. And they're not listed in any specific order. They're just listed in a way that sort of makes a nice, cute little acronym out of it that people will remember. And the first is security. Years ago, I would not have mentioned this hardly at all, but the world of news changes. And now the first thing that comes to most people's minds that need to be improved, a challenge at their school sites, is security. And that goes to things, little eye candy icons on the right-hand side of this slide, give you an indication of some of the ways that school districts today are solving issues of security. That left upper hand picture is what's called an access control system. Anybody who's gone to a hotel in the last few years now knows that most of them don't have keys anymore. They have cards like this, and this sort of technology is available in schools now. It simply wasn't even technologically possible 10 years ago. Technology, a big one. This was big before COVID. It sort of kind of waned because people had gotten their schools wired through E-rate and other sorts of financing options. But it's come back up because of COVID, believe it or not, because we've really tested our distance learning capabilities. And now we're seeing the need for a much more robust backbone, as it's called, within the school. As I often tell my master planning clients, on a given day, if your kids were all at the campus, there are more computers on at your local elementary school than in the entire neighborhood that surrounds it on a given business day. So you can imagine the amount of data that's being pushed in and out of a school when you're trying to stream video and other sorts of instruction. So technology has come back up to the forefront, greatly tested by our COVID pandemic. Evolution, a little bit less understood of a challenge, but evolution for those of the older group, our schools don't teach the way they used to. That goes all the way back to technology again. And so our buildings need to change with that so that they actually will be more flexible for the type of instruction that's going on. Who would have thought that our kids would be doing their English homework on the kitchen table every day? But now they're actually doing their English instruction and class time on the kitchen table. So our schools are evolving too, and when everybody's back in the classroom, it won't be the same classroom they left. The schools have changed the way that instruction is done. It's much more independent. It's much more problem solving and more theoretical work rather than just rote writing on a blackboard and repeating what's there. Maintenance is an obvious one. Master planning isn't necessarily the idea of, there's a leak in the wall here, let's fix that. That's more day-to-day maintenance. When we talk about master planning and from a master planning perspective, it's more long-term maintenance. When was the last time air conditioners were replaced? What's our roofs look like? Things like that, not just fixing a leaky pipe. Parity is a often misunderstood one. Parity is not equality. Parity does not mean your schools are all the same. They can't be. They were all built in different eras, but it means that there should be similar facilities at each school. If we're going to teach a similar curriculum, then we need to have similar facilities to deliver that curriculum. The schools are tools to deliver a curriculum. That's what they're there for. And so it's important that the schools be of parity. That can go to all sorts of things. It can go to whether kids are in portable or permanent classrooms. It can go to the number of square feet of support space or restroom capacity from school to school to school. One thing that's true in education is the standard is change, and enrollments change at schools all the time. Portables are added, but maybe not some of the support space that goes with those portables. And then lastly, another challenge, of course, that we all face is sustainability. And that's more than just solar panels, but it goes to how do we irrigate our areas of planting, and how are we just good stewards of the environment, which also goes to the pocketbook, because those sorts of things, while they may have an initial investment, can save a district tremendous operating costs over time if you can reduce your water bill, your power bill, your gas bill, and all the rest, and just make a healthy environment. I will pause here for a second and say that COVID has also created a heightened sensitivity to the air quality in our classrooms, and to make sure that when our kids do return to the schools, that they are returning to a healthy environment. Next slide. So if that's what ails you, or typically ails most districts, then what do you do about it? What are the cures? And it's just like going to a doctor. If you have an elbow pain, the doctor is going to probably tell you to do physical therapy or surgery or a medication or a ointment. The same is true in architecture and construction. The universe of remedies typically boil down to one of these four. You either build something you don't have, and that might be, to use the analogies we just did, there's a facility at the campus that has never been there, and you really need that facility. It just never was there on the school, or maybe the school has been repurposed over the years, and so it's changed the grade level configuration, and so it needs a new facility that's just not on the campus. Or number two, you renovate something you already do have. And this comes up all the time. Schools change. Some schools are older. You may still have some old program in a school that hasn't really been taught in years. We run into that all the time. And so the room you're talking about was configured for a curriculum that you don't even teach anymore, but the teacher's doing a yeoman's job of teaching the curriculum. Unfortunately, they're working with cabinetry and equipment that really is just dusty and hasn't been used in years. It's not just buildings. The third remedy, and is often the case when we do master planning, there's a lot of discussion. I think it's because the public doesn't use the buildings a lot, but they do use the site and the grounds. And this speaks to things like parking lots and fencing and playground equipment and the status of play fields, all of the stuff that's not under the roof of the building, but is just as important to actually being a functional and operational school. And then lastly, something that most people wouldn't think an architect would know anything about or talk about is upgrading the furniture, technology, and equipment. And this is the stuff that if you shook the building, it would fall out. You know, if you shook it upside down, it would fall out. It's not necessarily attached to the building, but it is very, very important to keeping the, again, the supporting the curriculum that's trying to be instructed. I talked earlier on about the flexibility of environments. Probably the biggest change we're seeing in our educational environments these days is the furnishings. So the furnishings that we all went to school with were probably what's called a sled type desk with a shelf under the writing surface. Well, you don't need a lot of that if you're going to have a much more flexible environment. And in fact, if you're constantly going to tell kids to get into small groups so that they can discuss a topic, you better make sure you have furniture that moves so that an 8-year-old can actually move it to get into a small group. So as some people say, we're teaching to the test, I have coined the phrase, we're teaching to the furniture. And so oftentimes our district clients are looking to experiment with new, more flexible furniture that will allow groupings to occur over time. Next slide. So this is not, I'm not going to read all of this, but to give a hint on what some of these are those same issues again: security, technology, evolutionary maintenance, parity, and sustainability, and just give maybe just some hints. I'll pick out a couple that come up. I already talked about in the security topic about the potential to install an access control system, what most people think of as smart locks. Why do districts want to do this? Because it means if you have a substitute teacher who comes on site, that you can program them a key that morning, and by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that key no longer works anymore. And so basically they don't have to worry about rekeying the school if somebody happens to lose their purse or drops their keys in a parking lot at the local grocery store, whatever. These are very, very helpful. And they can also tell a district when somebody last came or left through a door. They're literally smart. They have a memory. And so you actually can know when somebody was on campus or which key opened a door. Just as importantly, our schools are used by lots of community groups. So it means that a school district can program the lock so that the lock only works from 5 until 7 p.m. So for example, if we were having this town hall at San Ysidro Middle, you could give out keys that only open the door to the multi-purpose building from 5 until 7 p.m. And then at 7:01, the keys don't work anymore. Very, very helpful for schools these days with as much flexibility as is going on. Technology, we talked about a little bit already, and just the ability to program and provide what's called in the industry pathway or backbone to push data through the cables. And what you might not realize, however, is that is all essentially starts from wired devices somewhere at the front end of the school. And that stuff generates heat with all the video. And so you need air conditioning to cool those devices or you will burn them out. So it's invisible to most people, but to the architects, there's a whole backbone of stuff going on behind the scene to make all this electronics work. Evolution, we talked about a little bit in the 21st century flexible furniture, but it also goes to things like upgrading cabinetry in the school. We're storing a lot less stuff. A lot of the cabinets that are in schools now are storing books. They're storing books that people needed because they didn't have a tablet. Well, now that you have a tablet, the question is, why do we have all these cabinets to store books that we never take out of the cabinet anymore? So things are really changing drastically in our school environments. Next slide. Maintenance, we talked about again. You could go around your schools and probably not pay a lot of attention to it. I can tell you that Paulo and the guys in maintenance and operations do, and buildings don't last forever. So at some point you need to go through and rejuvenate, if you will, some of the surfaces within the buildings. These are things that are difficult for districts to do out of the general fund, but with something like your local bond program, you can actually do a deep cleaning, if you will, into some of these. And what's come up in a lot of your school sites is replacing play equipment and surfacing. Very difficult to do just out of the daily general fund, but much easier to do when you have the availability of bond funds. And the idea again here would be to develop standards where essentially you replace them all at the same time so you can get equity of parts, and things break, you have the same bolts, and you can put things back together much more easily if it's all bought as one package. Parity is, as I've mentioned before, it can come even just down to whether a student and teacher is in a portable classroom or permanent construction. Oftentimes the portable's out in the back 40, as they say. It's not near bathrooms. There's no covering to get in the rain or anything. And yet the other kids are indoors in the school and they have all those things near them. So parity is important to just align the facilities. They get out of alignment over time, just like a car engine, and nothing to be embarrassed about. Happens to all districts. And then we already talked a little bit about sustainability and enhancing natural daylighting within the school. One of the things that has been shown in study after study is that the two best ways to improve your test scores, to improve the health of your buildings, is to increase the natural ventilation that comes through the air conditioning system, the changing of the air, if you will, that goes into the building, and then also increasing daylighting in the rooms by having windows that you can actually get some sort of a view out of. Studies have shown these are the two best things you can do, and your schools are all actually in pretty good shape when it comes to daylighting. Next slide. Now I'm going to skip this one because this is actually a holdover, and we'll go to the 3 sites. So next slide. So now we're going to focus on the 3 schools, and these are the schools from a very, very tall ladder way up in the air, and I hope they make sense to those watching or listening. This is Ocean View Hills, and surprisingly enough, these 2 schools, the 2 we'll talk about first here, Ocean View Hills and Vista, are very close together and are in the sort of the newer northeast quadrant of the school district. But even though they're new, it doesn't mean they're without needs of some facility cleanup issues. So we have met with the principal of each of the sites, and I'm going to ask for the next. So that's what the school looks like from the air. Hopefully you recognize it if you're a parent or student or a neighbor of that school. Next slide will show you what the principal gave us as input. Now, we did not get the principal's input with this list in mind. They gave us rapid fire input, and I essentially categorized them into these 4 remedies that I talked about earlier. So at Ocean View Hills, the biggest one that came up was a permanent building to replace the remaining portables. There are a few portables on the site. And of course, this all has to do with enrollment and the alignment of the facility. And then also there was some changes made recently to the school up at the front door with gates and the like. But the principal mentioned that while that was good for security, there really is no center up at the front of the school where parents can sort of have a devoted space or a volunteer center. The floor plan just really didn't allow for that. And so in the master plan, that might be one thing the district might want to look at. If you're going to secure your sites, you also don't want to make them a fortress. You want to make them welcoming to the community. So many districts are looking into these sorts of spaces, something up at the front of the school where you have now been buzzed in, but you're still not roaming all over the campus, even though you're on campus. In the renovation category, the first thing that came up was replacing the, sometimes these seem small, but it's replacing the MPR carpet. That's the multi-purpose room, that's the term, with more resilient product. Even the day that I was there and toured the school, they were using the MPR for different types of activities, and the flooring that's been in there since its inception is probably not the right type of flooring for what they're currently using the room for. That's understandable, happens all the time. On the site category, they talked about replacing playground equipment. And as I mentioned, this had come up at almost all the sites. And then there is the need for a securable gate at the eastern service drive. If you're going to secure your schools, they have to be secured all the way out to the farthest point. Sometimes that's the property line, sometimes that's the parking lot entrance. Otherwise, you still have people on campus. They may not be in the buildings, but they're able to get around on the site. So that was important to the principal. Reestablish some courtyard landscaping. It hasn't maybe lasted as long as it should have. The principal was hoping for a better solution. And then finally, considering some security screening at the open playground, essentially where this school is sited. It's approximate or adjoining other non-school uses. So that was something that came up. There was nothing really noted about furniture, technology, and equipment, but I bet you the staff, when we meet with them, might have some input there. Next slide. Similarly, Vista Del Mar is a relatively recently constructed school. but this one's unique. And I actually gave an overview presentation to the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee just last week on the same topic. You have a couple of schools that are very similar. You have a couple that are very unique. This is one of the unique ones in that it really wasn't designed for the same uses, that grade levels that it's currently being used for. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see why the input here is very unique. So one of the things that's happened at Vista is it now is in a K-8 environment. Well, when you change things to older grade levels, you now have the need for other facilities that when it was built as an elementary school, it just didn't have. So it's now got portable locker rooms as an example. So middle school kids, their locker rooms are essentially a bridge to the future, which would be a permanent wing with actual permanent PE locker rooms to deliver that middle school curriculum. And then likewise, there's some areas that were built when this school was built, it was nice and new, but over the time they've realized that they don't really have overhangs at the second floor wings. And so for those who have been there on a rainy day, you're basically just doing the mad dash to get to some of these classrooms because there's no covering at all between a few of these areas on the campus. And those should be remedied in the next major facility lift. Renovating something old, this is just like the PE locker rooms. There were kindergarten spaces there, but they're not really proper middle school spaces. They're currently being used for science because they're bigger, because they have water and all that with them, but there aren't kindergarten rooms. And so those sorely need to be modified into what the school's using those facilities for now, which is not a kindergarten courtyard, but more of a middle school science courtyard. Couple other minor things in there. The main office was never designed to be a single point of entry. It's very deep in the center of the school, and although fencing has put somewhat of a band-aid on it, I think everybody believes there's probably a better way to accentuate the main office and direct or funnel people, if you will, to the front door of Vista Del Mar. And in improving the site and grounds, removing some of the old elementary school play equipment, just because that's really not appropriate for what they have there. Just some minor things in the furniture and equipment. Next slide. So one of the other outlier schools that you have, and it's the last one I'll talk about, is San Ysidro Middle. And San Ysidro Middle is the big heavy lift here, and that's because it's one of your bigger schools, but it's also one of your older schools and really has not been renovated all that significantly in the past. So that's San Ysidro Middle from the air, and all of the portables you see sort of in the southern section of the lower part of that diagram, they're not even there anymore, all of them. It just happened to be when the satellite flew over to take this photograph. So a few years ago, it got a new MPR building, probably more than a few to most of you on the call. But the main school itself, next slide, this is really one of the bigger heavy lifts around the district, is that this school is old and hasn't had a significant renovation in many, many years. So a couple things that really popped out in our discussions with the principal, and I'm sure it'll come up again when we meet with staff in a couple weeks. There is an old cafeteria shelter on I'm going to say the west side of the campus up against the road, basically. And that isn't even really being used for that anymore. It's just a holdover from before the new MPR cafeteria was built. So there's got to be something better to do with that than what it is. The main office, even more buried than it is at Vista Del Mar, is right in the center of school. Very traditional older school setting. That was the way we did it. I've been practicing for 40 years, and that's the way you did it. You put the office in the middle of the school so the principal could see the whole campus. Unfortunately, that puts the office a long way from the front door or front gate or parking lot. So I think the movement afoot is to move the office at Vista Del Mar up closer to the front of the school. So it's the first thing you come to, not the last thing you come to, and create more of a single point of entry. Now, the renovation category looks small, but I could have made this list as long as the entire page. The school is sorely in need of renovation, which basically, what's renovation? It needs all new finishes, all new cabinetry. It essentially needs, in our jargon, it's called a modernization project. It's modifying the school and bringing it up to current standards. And with that, then it's no surprise that the grounds are in a similar shape, and there needs to be a significant TLC spent on the playground and some of the pavement issues, which are just uneven. And then the furniture goes along with it. Generally, when you modernize a campus, and those who've been around the district would see this at Smythe and La Mirada, you come back behind with newer furniture that fits the new floor plan. So those are the three schools that I came, air quotes, to talk about this evening. I think these three are very interesting in that they all have very unique needs. They are not the same at all in plan. Two are relatively your newer schools, and one is one of your older schools. So they're very unique. So I don't know if you have anybody. That's what we've garnered already from input, and we expect to get more when we meet with the staff in a couple of weeks. And we'll see if there's anybody on the town hall, I guess, that has any other input. But hopefully this primer gives people on the call a little bit of an idea of the sort of scale of topics that we talk about in master planning.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. DeCamillo. Again, great presentation, great overview. I'd like to ask first Mr. Mata, and then we'll move on to those here in attendance. I'd like to ask Mr. Mata to read any public comment that we might have received previous or
Yes.
prior to this meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Gurmilan, board members and cabinet and guests. We do have one public comment from Miss Anita Gilchrist, our San Ysidro School District registered nurse, and she has input for the town hall meeting. Hi, hope this finds you and yours well. My biggest concern for physical plans for the future is the adequate health office facilities. The attached scale drawing of a floor plan and justification is based on experience and input from other school nurses. I have given this to the district administrators for the past close to 20 years with no success. All of our health offices are inadequate for the traffic and the treatment needs that come our way. And along with her comment, she submitted a design, and the design has some guidelines and descriptions, and I will read those now. Rationale for health office design. Based on 18 years of school nursing experience and on recommendations made by both the California and National School Nursing Organizations, federal guidelines related to ADA, the attached health office design is submitted. 1. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, it requires that we carefully protect all information on students that is gathered by the school, including health information. Files should be locked in cabinets and out of the traffic flow and waiting areas of the room. 2. Room number 2 should be used for private conferences between health staff and parents, etc. FERPA for hearing screening, which requires a quiet place. What's happening is she's describing each phase of the design under these numbers. So you have to have the design in front of you to be able to have the numbers correspond. Number 3, storage, room number 3 on the design. Area should be large enough to accommodate all supplies and equipment and to safely store stretchers and wheelchairs and other equipment. 4, treatment table. Treatment table in the bathroom allows for privacy during treatments such as bladder catheterizations. 5, 2 sinks in the health office allow for a clean and dirty area for hand washing and cleaning of equipment. 6, adequate counter and storage space associated with the sinks allows for proper storage of medications. Federal law requires secure locks on cabinets containing controlled substances, ADHD meds, etc., and frequently used items such as the thermometers and bandage materials. 7, at least one cot in the health office should have side rails for safety, such things as observation of students with seizures. 8, floor space should be adequate to allow for adult-sized students and the numbers that regularly come through the health office. 9, the word nurse should not be attached to the health office as this misleads parents and others. The persons generally manning the health office are unlicensed persons. It is against the law for unlicensed persons to call themselves nurses. 10, an accurate, well-maintained balance beam scale, and a wall-mounted sterometer for height and weight measurements should be in every health office. 11, wide doors for adequate handicapped and emergency, in parentheses, paramedic stretchers equipment to have access. Sliding inside doors would have best use of space. 12, refrigerator with large freezer and ice maker, as ice packs are required in large numbers for various injuries seen in the health offices. 13, the health office facilities are for students and staff of varying ages and sizes, and therefore should be sized and designed to allow adequate provisions of services for any age group. Other facilities. Number 1, hydraulic lift, freestanding or attached to the wall, for one handicapped bathroom on campus. 2, laundry facility, large capacity washer and dryer for special ed and health office laundry. 3, to help prevent spread of lice and other pests and diseases, facilities for storage of hats, coats, backpacks, and other personal items in classrooms should be individual lockers or cubbies with solid walls or hooks on the wall at least 18 inches apart. And that concludes the comments. And I think everybody will receive the attachments and the design. Thank you, Mr. President.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mata. I'll now ask first our board members, see if there's any comment. Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I had one, I guess, addition. Are we going school by school or for all the presentation?
I think all the presentation.
Okay, for Ocean View Hills, I wanted to see if we could somehow integrate. I know we had talked with the city about doing some improvements to the vehicle traffic in regards to pickups and drop-offs. Them using the adjacent parking lot. I think we had some issues there before, and I realize that's a city property. But if somehow we can incorporate some of the ideas we had to improve safety there, I think we should kind of take a look at that during this process. But that's the only comment I had.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Martinez?
Thank you, Mr. Gurmilan. Mr. DiCamillo, again, thank you for the presentation. A couple of things. I think that's obviously the process of getting community input is lengthy. I know that next you're going to be meeting with teachers and classified staff. Obviously, the next step after that would probably be to meet with or to get input from parents of the schools, as well as students that go to the school. I hope that obviously we reach that point to get a comprehensive look as to how we can improve each and every school. Additionally, aside from the input, I would recommend, I know that when we initially started talking about these town hall meetings, the idea was to essentially have a look at all of our schools, including our school sites. And one big, I would say the elephant in the room is the Buyer School site, which is perhaps the conversation that I believe the community would want to have the most input, simply because it's been an eyesore since before I've been elected. And I think it's been since 2008, 2010, since that school was torn down. So what I would recommend, obviously, I know that in terms of the input from the community, this is our third and perhaps last town hall, but I would recommend that we have additional town hall meetings specifically on the Buyer School site, and we market it that way, simply because I know that when we marketed these flyers, we didn't necessarily include that, and maybe that's perhaps we're not getting as much community input as we should. But at least for my end of it, I'm up for more discussion as to what we're going to be doing with that school site, particularly incorporating at least what we have thought of so far. Again, some ideas that we've had would be to, maybe a brand new preschool slash, admin center. There's many different ideas that I think that the community would definitely want to have that discussion. So I'm up for it, guys. I'm seeing if Dr. Potter and the rest of the team, we can make that happen and have those town halls and then market it that way, specifically just on this Buyer School site.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. I'll just have some brief comments. I think I'm just really excited to see what kind of improvements we can make to San Ysidro Middle School. That's one of the oldest schools. I think it's not just the oldest, but I think it's one of our, one of the sites or one of the places in this community that we all care and like and wish that we can improve. So I'm really hopeful that we can, focus quite a bit of our, time and resources also on San Ysidro Middle School. I think it'll just improve conditions for a lot of our families, a lot of our students, and really sets up this community, for the long run. I was also interesting. I don't know if this comes into play. I know that our community in our district is growing east. And does that factor in? And maybe Dr. Potter or Mr. DeCamillo can comment on that. I know that in the future, they're building quite a few homes heading east. And I don't know if how that's going to impact Vista Del Mar. And I know we've been, part of conversations in the past last year. It seems like it's been forever since I've heard anything about the developments over there on that side. But I'm just wondering if that impacts, our long range at this point.
I can speak to it just strictly from the facility standpoint. It certainly can. We have done already in the interim here, we have done a facility assessment that looks at uses, looks at open spaces, classroom spaces on your existing campuses. In other words, an enrollment study that looks at, where do you have open space on the schools? How loaded are your schools and all the rest of that? And I'll be sharing that at a future meeting to show you kind of where you have it. I can tell you this, if you go to a school, you'll rarely find a principal say that they have an open classroom, but that's what these sorts of studies are for. They're to show you, okay, here's where your kids are, here's where your rooms are. Let's see how closely those are aligned. Yes, that map I started with at the beginning is very telling. That's where the open space is for the school district to grow, is in that northeast corner. So you may want to keep your ears to the tracks for new improvements going on in that area that might warrant a future facility. But this enrollment study, or capacity study, as some people call it, is very eye-opening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. DeCamillo. Any other comments?
Mr. Gumilan, if I can.
Yeah.
I'd like to just clarify the next steps in this process. Taking into considerations the comments from both yourself and Mr. Martinez. So I imagine at this point you take the public feedback, the feedback you had from the stakeholders, the principals, the sites, the administration, these town halls. You put together some sort of document. At that point, before this goes to us to adopt, I imagine that there's going to be more public input, because I understand the importance of the buyer site, but I think Mr. Gumilan has a point that, the middle school has an existing population, and then we should address that before we address any kind of a new development that would happen at the buyer site. And I'd hate to stall the process by having another town hall that may or may not be well attended. So I'm just wondering if maybe that down the road there is an opportunity for more public input before we kind of go into a holding pattern.
And I'm actually just going to clarify, from my comments, Mr. Lopez, because I don't know if you interpreted correctly. My understanding, at least when I proposed the buyer site meeting, was not necessarily to stall the other innovations that we're looking to plan. My intention is to, at least from my understanding, if we're going to adopt a facility master's plan, that it would be a comprehensive one. And I'd hate to adopt something that's not comprehensive. So at least my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. DeCamillo, we're going to be moving in stages that I hope that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, which would be to essentially adopt modifications and a plan for the school sites, particularly also obviously for our are schools that are in need, particularly like Sims. But also at the same time, start having that conversation with the buyer school site, which in my opinion is extraordinarily important.
The answer is yes. This you can walk and chew gum at the same time. We have many districts who, you don't have to have everything completed and consensused. You have certain things on this that we've seen site to site to site that you may want to get started on. They are smaller, we call them quick start projects, that there really is no contention on at all. There are certain things that just want to get done around the school district. You have some others that, like the buyer site, that'll probably take a little bit more study. But no, you don't have to stall the whole thing. Behind the scenes, we have already started building diagrams, cost estimates, and all of that. But we can't really complete it or share it until we've gotten input on everything, because somebody might come up with something we hadn't heard of before. So the process hasn't stalled. We're kind of, how do I want to say it? We're somewhat verifying our hunches, if you will, by listening to input and seeing if anybody says anything that we've never heard before from our tours, our interviews with district staff, site staff, and so far not. Most of the input we're getting is very much in line with what we've heard in our tours around the district. Nobody yet has said something that shocked me, really. So now we're moving ahead. Yeah.
Mr. DiCamillo, is it reasonable to have that fourth town hall meeting specific to buyers sometime between November and December
Sure.
in terms of the timeline that you're working on, or is that not reasonable?
Oh, no, that would actually be excellent, because the meetings that are being set up with staff are all happening at the same months. But again, remember, that's all happening with school sites that you already have. So no, it would happen. That would be perfect timing, Dr. Barta. That would be perfect. Yeah.
And Mr. DiCamillo, the two housing projects that are located on the east region of our geographic boundary map, more in the Otay Mesa region.
Right.
To me, and Mr. Lopez might be able to help me, I believe there are about 25,000 houses each.
Mhm.
So is there a way for us to incorporate those two very large housing project developments into our long-range master facility plan?
The answer is yes. We need to talk to your demographic consultant, and then also in the generation factor, that means how many kids come out of a home, what sort of enrollment is a particular, and they have those factors already built in. A home is not a home is not a home. Some homes are targeted at non-school aged kids, so you build a home and it really doesn't generate any kids for the school district. Could be a senior housing complex. I'm not saying yours are, but that's what the study looks at. It takes a look at, it's called a generation factor. It says, this is how many kids to expect out of that development. So the answer is yes, and we do that quite regularly in areas such as yours that might have a pocket of new development in them. But the first thing to do is that enrollment study, that capacity study, which I have, and I've shared it with Marilyn and Paulo, that looks at, well, how many classrooms do you have now around the district, and where are all the kids, where are all the chairs and the seats and the desks right now? And we've already completed that.
Mr. DiCamillo, I believe that the housing development committees are using a factor of 0.5 per residential unit.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out. And on their maps, their projected maps, they seem to anticipate the need for 2 schools.
Yeah, they were probably
new
required to set
schools.
aside sites in the development for a school. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's just, I think what's difficult for us is we don't have the high school age students.
Right.
So in that area, what we need help with is understanding if they're projecting the need for 2 new schools in those developments. Is it 1 high school and 1 K-8 school?
That's what you talk to the city with. The city planning department and the school district align as sister agencies. That's one of those things where I say you're not actually the same agency, you're sister agencies, and you'll want to bring in the planning department folks and say, okay, what's going on with these developments, and what are they marketing these homes as, for what price range, and therefore are these for younger families, or are these for older families with older kids? And that's how that's all done.
All right, I'm eager to see that section in the long range master facility plan. Thank you. And my last comment to Mr. Gurmilan and Mr. Lopez is looking at San Ysidro Middle School, which is on the screen right now. Indeed, it does appear to be in our K-8 of our K-8 schools by far the one with the greatest facility needs. I think you pointed that out. And I would like to know kind of in the long range master facility plan, an estimated difference in cost between modernizing versus building new. I know we probably don't have enough money to build a whole new school. However, I would like to see the difference in cost between the two.
I can tell you
Only
that
because
open or closed session. We're often asked that question, Dr. Broder, and I already know the answer, but we can either do it in open or closed session.
okay. Well, at some
You want to
point,
know the answer right now?
email me the difference for a middle school, specific to a middle school. I'm sure it's many $1 million apart. It's just that the neighborhood deserves a good middle school facility. And so I'd like to know what our options are.
Yep, you bet.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Deacon.
You're always welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Potter. I have one quick comment. If we walk and chew gum going forward, I suggest if we do have another town hall specifically for maybe buyer, I suggest we invite community members that have been involved that might provide us some input, because I'm afraid that if we do this again virtually, I don't know. I just don't have a good feeling that we might have a great turnout again. And so I would suggest maybe we can do some sort of kind of like a virtual town hall with a focus group of individuals from the community that we personally invite through our, community outreach, and see if they would like to participate and share their thoughts and ideas. And that might be a little bit more effective than hoping, for people to send their comments in that. But I don't know, it's just a suggestion. But I agree that we should, continue to receive input on all sites. Those two are significantly important. But anyway, that was just a thought.
Mr. President, the staff agrees with your comments, and I'm going to ask our Chief Business Official, Marilyn Adriansen, to share how we would advertise for a final town hall meeting.
Yeah, for our final. Did you want me to share?
Marilyn, yeah, no, another thought would be, and I don't know what the timeline of this has to happen. Like, so if there's a deadline as to when we have to approve the comprehensive master plan, and if not, we can always extend it. I mean, frankly, we can, like I said, we can do it in stages. Like right now we could focus on, Sims, for example, and then after maybe the new year, if obviously there's no timeline or deadline as to when we need to do things, then maybe things will be better in terms of maybe in having an actual town hall meeting. I don't know. But at least from this point, there really is no rush if there isn't a deadline as to when we have to approve the comprehensive plan.
From a strictly facility planning standpoint, no, there is not. With T&U passed, you don't have the same pressure that some districts do to say they have to get this approved prior to calling for an election. So you have that luxury. However, you will eventually go under the pressure of people saying what's happening. So you also want to keep things moving. It's a little bit of both.
Ms. Adriansen?
No, I just wanted to comment. We will be sending out a massive mailer to the entire community sometime next week, where the community can submit their comments via telephone, email, and by regular mail as well.
Okay. Hopefully we get really good feedback. Awesome. All right. Any other comments from our board members from Cabinet? Dr. Potter, Mr. Camilo? No? Without further comments, it's I guess it's time to thank everybody for putting this meeting together. Thank you, Mr. DeCamillo. Thank you, everybody in attendance. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn our special meeting for this town hall.
So moved.
Mr. Martinez moves,
Second.
and Mr. Lopez seconds. Dr. Potter, thank you so much for sticking around. And could you please call a vote for us?
Calling for a roll call vote to adjourn the meeting, town hall meeting at 6:02, beginning with Board Clerk Rudy Lopez,
Aye.
Board Vice President Antonio Martinez,
Yes.
and Board President Mr. Gourmilan.
Yes.
Mr. President, the vote passes 3-0 to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. We're officially adjourned at 6:03. Thank you, Dr. Potter. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening and good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry to dash off. Bye, everyone. Sorry to dash off.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a good evening.